Hello, rock and roll rebels, and welcome to another episode of Ramble On with Rosie. We are here to discuss the late great birthday boy of yesterday, the one and only Joey Ramone, born Jeffrey Ross Hyman in New York City, which is a song we'll get to. But I decided the best way to honor Joey this year would be to do a review of his solo work. And I'm not gonna detail every song, but there's about seven covers and I mean seven original songs and one cover that I'm going to be covering, and then I'll briefly name drop the other songs on the albums because there's two posthumous albums and one single that have been released since Joey died. He didn't actually get any solo work released in his lifetime, sadly. So these came out in 2002, 2012, and then the single came out in 2015. So that being the basis of this episode, I will get down to it and start off with probably the most well-known solo Joey Ramone song, which is his cover of "What a Wonderful World." It kicks off his first album, and it's so great. I mean, for one, for anybody to make an iconic version of that song that almost rivals the Louis Armstrong version, it's pretty insane because Louis Armstrong pretty much owns that song. But on the other hand, um, you've got Joey's, which is almost as iconic just for a new generation. It's really impressive that he was able to pull off making that song, sort of his own, even in spite of it having been established as somebody else's for 50 years before. I'm not exactly sure when the Louis Armstrong version came out, but it was definitely a few decades older than Joey's. So the fact that he could make it his own in spite of it being pretty much owned by another artist is impressive. And then for me at least, the way he sings it, just the sweet and sincere and tender vocals with which he sings that song, it just moves me in some kind of way because it feels like Joey kind of passing on his wisdom to the world before he passed away. You know, his positivity, because the man, you may not think of him on surface as a very positive figure, but he extremely was. As I cover in my episode I did just all about his mental health and physical health struggles and just, life history in general. Um, Joey had to have a fairly positive can-do attitude to do everything he did in spite of everything he had going on against him. So to me, What a Wonderful World just feels like Joey's little reminder that we should, and look at the bright side of things. If he was able to, then goodness knows the rest of us have no excuse not to at this point. Then after that, on the first solo album, there's a couple songs called Stop Thinking About It, and Mr. Punchy, which is notable to me mainly for the fact that Captain Sensible of the Damned does some sort of backing call and response vocals. So there's that one. Then there's a favorite, his ode to his Foxy Finance journalist, Maria Bartiromo. I mean, who else is going to write an ode to the beauty of a lady who does reports on the stock exchange? So that's fun. I love Maria Bartiromo, especially as a 90s kid. It gives me a sense of how much things have changed, because he lists off a few of the hot, things to invest in, like what's happening with Intel, what's happening with AOL, and I'm like, nothing, Joey. I mean, I'm sure they still exist as companies, but they're not really the hot topic that they once were. I mean, AOL used to be so big with so many commercials and everything else. And they're owned by Time Warner, which still exists, obviously, but AOL is not the hot subsidiary of their company anymore like it was in the late 90s and early 2000s. And then But also, he's also got what's happening with Amazon, and I'm like, quite a lot, Joey. Funny you should ask. They're still doing fine. So, it's interesting. I think if I recall correctly from Mickey Lay's book, Joey Ramone's Brothers biography of Joey Ramone, uh, they Joey actually was a little bit into like investing and was one of the first people to have his own computer in the area and stuff. So that was cool. He was pretty on it and savvy. According to Maria Bartiromo's Wikipedia page, so take this with a grain of salt and not as gospel truth. Um, Her and Joey developed a friendship after um, the Ramones retired. So I don't know if that's true or not. Obviously, it was probably just a friendship and not as, romantic as the song makes it sound, because Maria got married in 1999. So clearly, if Joey did have a crush, it was one-sided, or he was just, as musicians do, couching his, you know, thoughts into a love song. I mean, think about how many artists have written songs for their friends that sound, that are sort of couched as romantic songs, but it was either about their kid or their best friend, um, where it wasn't as romantic as it sounded. It's just love songs sell. Congrats to The Clash for bucking that trend. Rock the Casbah is not a love song. And it was also last week's episode, if you're interested in checking out my episode on the Combat Rock album that had its 40th birthday last week. But moving on from Combat Rock and back to Maria Bartiromo and Joey Ramone, the next song on Joey's first solo album is Spirit in My House, which is kind of fun, heavy driving rhythm. I dig it. Not going to dig into it too much because it's more of a listen to than a talk about song. Venting, also known as It's a Different World Today, is way too accurate for today. I'm like, you thought things had changed and were kind of crazy in 1999 or whenever he wrote the song. I'm assuming 99 or early 2000 because, like with the cancer treatments and stuff, boy was in and out of the hospital a lot. Though he was still working on his album, even, when he was in the hospital, so props to that. But It's a Different World Today is a sort of a reflection on the tragedies and stuff that were going on in 1999 and 2000 and whenever he wrote the song. So, I mean, gotta remember, Joey died before September 11th happened. So, he thought the world was bad then. Boy, howdy, if you'd have stayed alive a couple months more, Joey, it was gonna get a whole lot worse. And it's not exactly great today, as we all know. So I'll get off that topic and move on to drugs. No, the next song is like a drug I never did before, which is, a good song. It's just sort of in there. It's not really much to say about it, in this week's episode at least. Searching for Something, to me, which is the next song. Searching for Something is the next song on the album. And to me, it vibes like it might have been inspired by Joey's trips upstate to visit his ex-girlfriend Angela Galato and his goddaughter, who was Angela's daughter. It's sort of the closest thing Joey ever got to like getting to raise a kid was hanging out with Angela and Raven upstate, kind of out in the country a bit, you know. And from what Angela says in Mickey Lee's book, it did Joey a lot of good. Granted, eventually his OCD would drive him where he had to go back to the city to check on something. But when he was out there, he was really at peace upstate, with her and her daughter. Everybody thought Raven was Joey's kid because she also had dark hair, but she wasn't. But according to Angela, at least, Joey couldn't have kids. There's no elaboration on the book whether that was medically or simply by choice. I could understand either with Joey and all of his conditions. I could understand either he physically couldn't or he actively chose not to because, whether or not his, issues were genetic, he could pass them on to kids. He was, when his mental health was at its worst, occasionally violent, and having been abused as a child himself, I could see him definitely not wanting to put another little baby human being in that situation that he had had to live through as a kid. So, regardless of whether it was personal or physical, Joey Ramone did not have any children and chose not to, or nature shows that he couldn't. I'm not sure. Angela just says he couldn't have kids. However, that was meant. It's not for, our business to know those personal details, but, Raven, Angela's daughter, sort of was, Joey's Joey's kid as much as he could have one, which was good for him. I mean, it's amazing with somebody as many issues as he had, got to live as full of a life as he did, got to experience normal life in his not so normal life. I mean, his life wouldn't have been normal even if he hadn't joined a rock band and changed the face of music. But given that, he still got to have a taste of what fatherhood was like, being the godfather to Raven, and, a taste of being up and visiting her and Angela in upstate New York, and, you know, having some calm, restful days, and searching for something kind of feels like it's along those lines, because it's about so and so moved up to Rochester, and so it's about like this girl moving out of the city, but also, I felt like $1 million, and something that money couldn't buy is another line in the song. Excuse me, morning voice. Um, but it feels like it could have been inspired by his trips upstate to see Angela and his goddaughter Raven. But the next song is extremely autobiographical. It's called I Got Knocked Down, or I Get Knocked Down, but I'll Get Up. And literally sounds so much like Joey's life. Like, it sounds like he wrote it being frustrated, laying in a hospital bed, because it's totally Joey's fighting spirit in this song. And it's wrote in such a, this has to be inspired, like, by his life way, because literally he's bemoaning that he's laying in a hospital bed, and how he sings out I want my life, which is totally understandable with Joey's life being as it was, where he did spend it when he wasn't on the road, and sometimes when he was, he spent an inordinate amount of his time in a hospital, whether it was for the foot infections, the cancer treatments, the hip replacements. Like, boy was in the hospital quite a lot. I mean, he was born with a teratoma, which, if you want more details on all that, check out the Miracle of Joey Ramone episode, where I go into more detail as to what all health conditions Joey had. But he had a lot, so he spent a decent amount of his time in a hospital bed, which could be frustrating when, you want to go out and live your life and live a normal life, as normal as you can get it. And so Joey, it just feels very autobiographical. It feels like it was written in frustration, stuck in a hospital when he'd rather be out living his life, which is completely understandable. Then he does 1969, which is a Stooges cover. And then the last track on the first album is Don't Worry About Me, which is a hard request, given everything that was wrong about Joey, if we're taking the song autobiographically. Yet again, it's a song that's like set as like a love song, breakup song, but in a way it's kind of like A Wonderful World, and it feels like a reassurance of like, hey, Joey's like, you know, I'm leaving this so that y'all can have some peace while I'm gone. Not that Joey, that's the amazing thing about Joey Ramone though, he never gave up. He never really believed he was dying until like the day he was dying. He kept persevering and fighting like he had done his whole life, which is just astonishing. To have that much wrong and never give up is crazy inspiring. But yeah, so Don't Worry About Me is a love song, but also sort of feels like a reassurance from Joey that, don't worry, it'll all be okay. Sort of a goodbye, which I'm going to try not get emotional over here. Joey Ramone and Joe Strummer are two of my favorite artists, and they're both dead, so it's really easy for me to get there. the second album that he did, which was just or Joey Ramone, which is somewhat based off the fact that almost every sentence out of Joey's mouth ends with which my dad would have like a huge. My dad's always correcting my grammar when I'm speaking and using crutch words as he calls them. So Joey Ramone clearly wouldn't have survived with a dad like mine, but it's Joey Ramone, or just is the name of the second album. But anyways, the first song is Rock and Roll is the Answer, which it is, but like, okay, about the Joey Ramone, album, there's a slight amount of controversy because some people have accused, some people, Marky Ramone, have accused Mickey Lee of just like monopolizing on his brother's legacy and releasing subpar tracks to make a buck. But I do not see it that way at all. As a Joey Ramone fan, as a Ramones fan, I'm like, we would contentedly buy an album of Joey Ramone like singing in his garage with that acoustic guitar Mickey gave him that he never replaced the two broken strings on. Like when your favorite artist, when your hero is dead, you will take any content and you don't care that it's not the best. The point is there's something quote unquote new by an artist who is no longer around to give us any new music. Like, it's one thing if an estate or a family member just keeps re-releasing the same material in new packaging. Yeah, that kind of feels like they're trying to make a buck off the fans. But this, especially because, I mean, shit, the Ramones never made that much money anyways, as we all know. So it's not like you're going to make a buck off of the legacy of a lead singer whose band didn't ever have that much commercial success to begin with. So I don't feel that it's Mickey Lee trying to make a buck. I feel like it's Mickey Lee respecting the fact that the fans of the Ramones and of Joey in particular would happily listen to anything that's left of our dead hero. Like, it's obvious, that's what we want to do. So that was just Marky Ramone being salty, which is like the Ramones' MO, that there's some sort of family drama in the family. I mean, it's been there since their first album, and we're a happy family because clearly weren't. But that's why Tommy's acceptance speech at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, if we truly were like brothers, was 100% accurate, because have you seen families and siblings and how they relate and how somebody's always mad at somebody in the family? Like, seems pretty accurate to me. So that's some of the controversy around this second album, was Marky Ramone, and I think some other people took it as Mickey doing a cash grab, but I just take it as Mickey being like, hey, there's a little bit of new content left in my brother's back catalog, and the fans deserve to have this because it's all we've got left of him. Because as much as I love listening to the same 40 songs over and over and over, actually the Ramones did 40 songs, but you know what I'm saying. It is nice when it's like getting excited when a living artist that you love releases a new album. Like, it's the same thing, except for it's more special when it's somebody like Joey Ramone or Joe Strummer or, Elvis Presley or something, though I'm sure everything Elvis ever did has been released now, probably in multiple. If you want to talk about people cash grabbing on their relative's legacy, yeah, Elvis is a more prime example of that than poor Joey Ramone and his brother Mickey Lee. Like, just saying. I'm over here beefed because I went to Graceland in October and I didn't get to see the house because they want like $80 to see the house. And I'm like, that's a lot of merch in the gift shop. Thank you very much. So, regardless, that little side tangent about Graceland aside, moving back to Joey Ramone, an almost equally influential figure to Elvis Presley, though less commercially successful by far. Like I said, Rock and Roll's the Answer is the first song on the album. Then there's Going Nowhere Fast, which is, I will admit the songs on the second album are not as memorable. There aren't as many as memorable ones, at least, as there are on the first. But so those first two were just sort of there, and they're decent songs, but they're not really they don't really grab you. Now the third song, New York City, for one, it's great hearing, Joey singing about, like, his city that he loved so much. I mean, because he put a lot back into the New York scene and stuff after the Ramones retired. He was very, I guess, community minded as much as one can be in like the largest city in the country. Um, so he's singing about his town, like Sinatra was singing about my town. Wait, that was Chicago. But still, point. Sinatra sang about New York City too. But anyways, New York City is a very catchy 2000s rock vibe to it. Like it could and should have been a hit, except for it wasn't released until 2012. Uh, was when the second album was released. I feel like if it had been released in the posthumous first album, Don't Worry About Me, it might have had more success because it has a very early 2000s catchy rock vibe, and I like it. And you can also catch the distinct sound of Stevie Van Sant on backing vocals. Miami Steve. As a huge Bruce Springsteen, the E Street Band, I will always be happy whenever Stevie or anybody else pops up from the E Street Band, but especially Stevie because he's my favorite. I almost like him as much or more than Bruce. So anyway, Stevie's on backing vocals. He makes another appearance later on the album, but not on vocals. We'll get there. And it's also nice because I mean Joey sang on Stevie Van Sant's Sun City record about apartheid in Africa and stuff, which was very helpful to getting that the ball rolling for taking care of that corrupt and unjust system in South Africa. So Joey helped Stevie, and here's Stevie singing on Joey's posthumous record. Stevie is also joined on backing vocals by members of the Patti Smith Group. Ugh, can't say that one fast. The Patti Smith Group and the Dictators as well. So I think it was like Handsome Dick Manitoba of the Dictators for New York City as well. Then there's Waiting for the Railroad, which is just a sweet, slower song. It sort of kind of has some similar vibes to Questioningly by the Ramones, where it's just sort of a pleasant, sweet little song that's slightly bittersweet. I Couldn't Sleep is definitely Joey's take on like the 60s dance songs that name drop all the other songs, like, I Can Mash Potato, I Can Do This. Do You Love Me Now That I Can Dance, where, the purpose of the song is to name drop at least like 10 different dance moves. I Couldn't Sleep is kind of Joey's take on that. What Did I Do to Deserve You is the next song in it. I enjoy it, but it does feel incomplete. It feels like there was supposed to be more to it, but obviously they're working with the material that they have left over. You can't, cut in Joey's voice if it's not there to, singing that song. So that's unfortunate because I feel like it would have been a fun song. I'm just trying to figure out with What Did I Do to Deserve You, if it's a positive or a negative song. I'm like, is it a positive of, oh my gosh, she's that great, or a positive of, oh my gosh, what did I do to deserve this misery? Like, there's no clear context for which way it goes, which is intriguing. Then there's a song called 7 Days of Gloom. And then Eyes of Green is a good song. I like it's kind of lyrically intricate. I'm not saying it's musically the greatest on this album. It does kind of stand out. So Eyes of Green, good song. Joey's voice is doing good. Now, however, the next song, how we were talking about like how I couldn't, you get tired of listening to the same 40 songs. Well, there are some songs that you can listen to 40 times straight and it's still great. And that would be this next song, which is Party Line, where Joey absolutely nails the 60s girl group vibes like completely. He even has there's some female backing singers on the song. Like it feels even the intro drum beat sounds like Be My Baby. Um, it's such a throwback to the 60s girl groups, which of course Joey absolutely adored. He was such a huge fan. That's why he was like, you know, so inspired when he got to work with Ronnie Spector of the Ronettes. So it was just like, oh my gosh, he was having a little bit of a fanboy moment, I think. Because he produced her She Talks to Rainbows. I can't remember if it's an album or an EP. But anyways, he produced that for her, which she's covering a Ramones song. But anyways, Party Line is such a fun song. It's so sweet. It's perfect. Joey's voice is phenomenal on this song. Like, it's some of the, it may be his best vocal performance, if you're asking me, in my opinion, uh, on any of his posthumously released work. Like, it's so good. I love it because he's singing in his lower register. Um, so his voice is lower than it usually is. But the song is slow enough where he has like room to use it. It's not like Pet Cemetery where he's in his lower register for part of the song, but he's so, it's such a fast, hard, aggressive song that it doesn't really have like the room to, sound lush. Joey's voice, for Joey's voice at least, sounds pretty lush on Party Line. It's great. Like, I can't say enough about this song. I love it. I also love how he nailed his homage to 60s girl groups perfectly. Um, and like I said, there's call and response vocals, sort of, or not call and response, but there's like a duet ish um, with a female vocalist, which is former punk artist. I guess she's still a punk artist, Holly Beth Vincent. She had a band called Holly and the Italians. They were a punk band who actually got to open for the Clash and the Ramones, which that's pretty cool. And, you know, for me, the duet sort of, it feels like her vocals, the female vocals on the song, the way they're sort of feel filled with like nostalgic love and longing. It kind of feels like how we all feel about Joey being gone. It's like, we we wish we could pick up the phone and call him on the party line and, get some more music and joy that he brought to this planet uh, out of it. Sadly, we don't have that option, but like, it's to me, this party line is like the perfect capstone to Joey's career where it's just like, this is what I'm going to leave you with and enjoy it, and that's all, folks. For this album, that's not all, but to me, it's the perfect capstone. After this song on the album, you have Merry Christmas, I Don't Want to Fight Tonight, which is, I think it's decently well known in the Ramones world at least. And then 21st Century Girl, and There's Got to Be More to Life, Make Me Tremble, Cabin Fever, and Life's a Gas, which are all like decent songs that probably could have been done a little bit better, but yet again, they're only working with extant vocals left behind by Joey. They can't make something there that isn't there. So they're decent enough songs, especially, if you just want to hear some new, quote, new content by Joey Ramone. Um, and then the single that was released in 2015 is just called Remembering, and the production value, like the recording, like the sound feels a little shaky, but it's Joey taking on like the 60s pop doo-wop sound and nailing it. Like, again, I feel like as much as I love the Ramones, when you're in the Ramones, you're kind of trapped in having to sound like the Ramones and do the Ramones thing. And it's sort of the cult of the Ramones, let's be real, as far as the band members went. And so with Joey's solo work, you get more of a taste for the other flavors of music that he was into. And it's him, like exploring some of the stuff he did on End of the Century a little bit more, because he's free to do it because it's not his, it's not a Ramones album, it's a Joey album. So he can kind of do whatever he wants. Especially with this being stuff that was released posthumously, you didn't have to worry about it affecting his future career or how people perceived him, because at this point we're all like, oh my goodness, there's Joey content. It could literally be him making hippopotamus noises, and we'd all be like, I need this song right now because it's all we've got left. So, Remembering is well worth checking out. It's on Spotify, probably on YouTube too. In fact, I think it is. So you can check it out there. Sort of a little hidden gem single that was released in 2015. And it's good. I enjoy it. It's nice to hear Joey trying on different musical styles when you're so used to just hearing him do the Ramones thing. So that that's it for this week. Um, I'll be back next week, more than likely with another introspective deep dive into Bruce Springsteen lyrics. That is the plan. So be prepared to think about life, because that's what the boss makes us do. And I will see y'all next week. And until then, be kind to each other and rock on.